And the chair never mentioned any problem with the agenda or any issue with the reason for this travel. So the only reason she gave us is, well, I'm not traveling. And I'm capturing this in that email that you are referring to, page 188. I'm saying the chair did not pitch for this meeting and had the letter sent to say she was sick and could not travel. The chair never gave the CEO nor me any reason why she did not accept Emirates' invitation.
You see, you say in the preceding paragraph, there was no formal discussion to be held.
Yes, so
just a courtesy meeting.
Yes,
with the top management and chair of EK, as well as a visit to EK HQ in Dubai.
Yes, my lady, so when I mean formal, it means when you are trying to discuss a particular topic with the intent of obtaining a particular outcome. So in this case, there was not supposed to be any formal discussion, and again, there should not be any because the chair is non-executive. And she could not be discussing any formal aspects of SAA's relationship with Emirates. She can mention the strategic cooperation, high-level discussions maybe, but it would not be regular for her to go into details that do not belong to her mandate.
Exactly. So the question is, there was no purpose to this meeting.
Lady, we have been around this block 10 times now. Mr. Buthelezi doesn't like the answer. It's not going to change. And we have limited time. And in a couple of hours' time...
Anyone ready yourselves, Mr. Buthelezi has still in 12:30. And if he wastes his time by going around in circles, let him do that. Mr. Buthelezi, I told you, until 12:30. That's why, and we will not take any breaks apart from the break that we're going to take for me to adjourn to hand down another judge. So, but you are the captain of the ship, and if you don't, he has to answer this now on various occasions. You might put his version of the first defendant to you, but there's no he's not deviating from what he said. In the end, you can argue that she didn't want to go because for whatever reason she didn't want to go. But I think he has now answered this question.
Well, I'll conclude with the question, but the point is, what you write as the question to which you answer here. You say the chair was summoned to go to meet with EK's chair, but didn't know exactly why. So, and what you answer there then deals with that, but we'll move on.
Just for the avoidance of doubt, in that document, when I quote, the chair was summoned, that is her own words, right? So it's not me saying that, see, I'm just quoting her own words during that meeting.
Then I'd like us to go to page 223. I think it's bundle 3, Marie. Do you have the action list resolution taken by the board?
Yes.
Meeting held on 5 March 2015.
Yes.
There's item 8.2 by ACO. I would assume that was Mr. Nico Pezerino.
Yeah.
And the topic is establishment of an aircraft leasing company. Do you see that?
Yes.
You testified yesterday that in that email or that letter that the chair wrote to Airbus, that emerged for the first time out of the blue. You remember that?
Yes.
Now, we've got here in March, the acting CEO and not the chair, having a discussion point about the establishment of an African leasing, a local leasing company. And let's read what it says. It was reported that a discussion paper would be developed on the establishment of an aircraft leasing company. It was stated that should SAA lack the expertise to draft the discussion paper, then the specialist would be engaged to draft the paper. Further, discussions on the establishment of a leasing company were also referred to strategy session of the board. You see that?
Yes.
Now, this is in 5 March, and that is a discussion taking place about the establishment of a leasing company. What do you have to say to that?
So, it's also called an aircraft leasing company, but it doesn't say an African leasing company. So, when I said that the chair, out of the blue, mentioned an African leasing company in her letter to Airbus, it is indeed coming out of the blue because there was no such African aircraft leasing company. Now, in this particular board meeting, there was a discussion on how to structure an aircraft leasing company for the SOEs. So it will be for SAA and SA Express, Mango, and it was an idea that was originally, I believe, developed in the LTTS, that there could be a way for the state to have a single financial special purpose vehicle to host those assets separately from the operating companies. So it is a technicality about which entity of the state actually owns the assets and then leases them to the SOEs.
So is your issue the fact that it was called an African leasing company?
So no, what I think this tells us is, you can see that on March there was a discussion, and I don't know when this list of resolutions was updated, so I don't know if it's actually dated, but it's probably post the 26th of August 2015, because you can see on page 225 there is a date on item 6.1 that says SMME tracker not in board meeting of 26th August 2015. So this is probably an update on the list of resolutions that dates August. So you can see that on this item 8.2, between the 5th of March and the end of August, there was no work that had been done because it says outstanding. And you can see that it was reported, it was stated that a paper would be developed. So it's a paper,
Yes.
a concept paper. So
Yes.
what would be the interest? And then it was also stated that should SAA lack the expertise, because that was I wasn't part of the board meeting, but I suspect the acting CEO mentioned, we're not leasing experts, so we probably would need to hire a outside consultant to draft this positioning paper on this. So you can see that it is a concept that the board has tasked the acting CEO to develop, and I mean that's perfectly in their own right, but you can see it's a very early stages. So when the chairperson of the board in September, and there still has been no work done here, writes to Airbus to say we are going to delay by a month or two the transaction that has been negotiated for 8 months, because an African leasing company is going to engage with you and take those aircraft. That is definitely reckless, because the African leasing company, the only existence that it has from the acting CEO perspective is this paragraph here.
Milady, this is a question that should have been put to the acting CEO at the time. This witness has testified he wasn't at the meeting. It has nothing to do with him. He's trying to explain his understanding. Now, the acting CEO has come and gone, and he can't answer this question. It should have been put to him.
Well, that may be true, but he, Mr. Buthelezi, so this is and he's explaining how it works. Just for, and so I would allow that.
But I want that on the record, please. That, yes.
Just tell me, in your expertise, when a SEO is going to get a leasing company, are you afraid of the procedures that should be followed?
Yes.
And what are those?
So it follows the normal procurement process.
So there must be a proper procurement before you choose a leasing company.
There is a very solid procurement process because the total value of the contract is enormous. Obviously, when you engage on the procurement of a lease, you actually sum the amounts that are paid for the total duration of the lease. So in this particular case, when we lease an aircraft, it's usually for 12 years, and 12 years at about $800,000 a month, the total value of the contract is enormous. So it would require, of course, among the materiality framework, that would go straight to the minister for approval because it's a big amount.
Was any procurement followed in this instance pertaining to any company?
No, well, what we did is we agreed with Airbus that they would lease the aircraft to us. And that was agreed with Treasury as part of the transformation of this, the swap agreement between the 320s and the 330s. So we didn't have to go into an RFP because obviously we were not entering into a new contract. We were just restructuring an existing contract with the supplier, an onerous contract, and therefore we didn't have to go into an RFP because Airbus was leasing this aircraft to us. What Airbus responded to the chair with regards to this particular leasing suggestion that she made about the African leasing company was that it would be absolutely fine for any leasing company, African or otherwise, to apply for a novation of the contract that Airbus had with us on that lease. So Airbus would be happy to sell down the leasing contract to any leasing company, provided they would respond to a RFP issued by Airbus, and they will meet certain conditions in terms of financial stability, reputation, etc., etc.
Can we please move to Airbus Evidence Bundle Volume 3? And can we please go to page 178? Now, these are the minutes of the special meeting, number 2015/06, of the SAA SOE Ltd Board of Directors, held on Tuesday, 29 September 2015. It was your evidence yesterday that you took issue with these minutes.
Yes, indeed. So I was, so that is, yes, I took issues of this minutes, and I don't know whether this is the, remember that that was a meeting that was held with two board members, Mrs. Kunyana and Mrs. Myeni, and the executive team. And then I received, whilst already placed on special leave, the draft minutes. And I immediately asked my colleague, Mr. Soga, to request those minutes to be amended because they contained a lot of erroneous information, seriously erroneous information, including in the heading. It was saying board meeting when it was not a board meeting. And I can see here it says special meeting, so maybe that's not the same version of the document.
Well, this is what I'd like us to refer to then. You see, your name appears as in attendance.
Yes.
Do you recall this meeting in particular?
I recall it very, very clearly, yes.
Were you in full attendance of this meeting for its duration?
Yes, I was.
Then let's go to page 181. In the middle of the page, there's a heading that says, is it of the same minutes, my lady, page 4 of 12? I beg your pardon. That's it, bundle three. Volume 3, my lady. Papers. One 181. Says there's a heading in the middle that says local aircraft leasing company. You see that?
Mm-hmm.
Now, in the minutes they call it local. And would anybody then be incorrect to interpret that as African as well? Would that be incorrect to interpret it as African?
No, would not.
Thank you. Now, it says the following. The board requested management to direct members to individuals or institutions which could unlock opportunities for SAA. In particular, it was stated that there was a need to access the Department of Trade and Industry, brackets DTI, National Industrial Participation Program. Do you know about that program?
Yes.
Funding for the local aircraft leasing company. It was stated that the idea was to request DTI, through one of its entities, to hold a majority stake in the aircraft leasing company, together with Public Investment Corporation and the DBSA, the Development Bank of South Africa. Now, do you recall this discussion?
I recall it very clearly, yes. And if I may,
yes.
It was not a discussion.
Right.
And those minutes are still wrong because it says the board requested, and I apologize, but it was not a board meeting. So when the chairperson of the board requests something, the board is not requesting something. She is requesting something, but if she wants something to be done, the board has to deliberate on that and instruct the executive. So in that particular case, the minutes are wrong because the board did not request management in this case. So I remember very clearly this discussion. There was a monologue, my lady, which lasted 2 days. And suddenly the chairperson mentioned, we want to create an African leasing company, and we want it to be funded by DTI, NPP, whatever, and make it happen. Now, it's very interesting because that's the first time that the chair mentioned that to me, because obviously those are not discussions that we would have very frequently. Remember that it's the same day, the 29th of September, that she sent the letter to Emirates. Sorry, not to Emirates, to Airbus, about the African leasing company that was going to be entering into discussions with Airbus. So if what Mr. Buthelezi is trying to tell me is that there is indeed a board resolution that justifies the aircraft leasing company for the letter to Airbus to be based on sound business foundations, I would say that this is really far-fetched, because that is an idea that the chair is developing. It is very wobbly. It relies on the management of SAA to start going after government programs to basically ask for their funding to establish a company that in the future may lease aircraft. Now, that is a project that even if all parties were in agreement and all parties had the funds, it's a project that would probably take anywhere between 2 to 3 years to be established. I mean, it's like starting a bank. And to, on the same day, consider this now granted and sending a message to Airbus to say, we have an African leasing company. We don't have one because the only existence of this African leasing company is in the mind of the chair here. And we are going to postpone the delivery of our Airbus by 1 or 2 months. It's completely crazy.
I've got 2 problems here. The first one is, a lot of what you say are your opinions. Do you accept that?
Could you be specific on which opinions you're referring to?
What you say, that this whole idea about this company and how it would work and how it wouldn't work are your personal opinions.
What I say is what I think, yes.
Yes. Second,
Was there any existing African leasing company at the time?
No, there wasn't,
you see,
to my knowledge.
you see, what I will not say, these are the comments of the chair, because what the minutes say is the board. Okay? And these minutes at this paragraph specifically make no reference to the chair in particular.
My lady, if I may, it is not the board, because the board was not constituted at this meeting. This was not a board meeting. This was a meeting of the executive team with the attendance of 2 non-executive board members, Mrs. Quinana and Mrs. Myeni. So those minutes are irregular. When it says the board, it's wrong, number 1. Number 2, I attended this meeting, and I recall very clearly that those words came from Mrs. Myeni. I recall because I was sitting at that meeting and was paying attention. So it is indeed not the board, it is Mrs. Myeni's request.
Sute, you write to Viva Soga and you write to Wolf to object to these minutes, and nobody does. Do you accept that?
Nobody does?
Nobody objects to these minutes.
No, I did object to these minutes.
No, to the people that you then asked to object and question these minutes, they did not.
Well, I'm not in a position to give you an answer on that because as I was placed on special leave, I don't know what happened after I gave instruction. And I believe Wolf Meyer had left the company around the same time because the minutes were circulated on the 4th of November, if I remember correctly, for a meeting that was held on the 29th and 28th of September. And by then there was already a bit of significant change in the management team. So unfortunately, I don't know what happened to my request for the minutes to be changed.
Okay. Last question. Can we go to page 196E?
E.
It's an email at the bottom of the page from Ruth Kibuka, sent on 3 October to one Jerome, copying Akum. Our Akum is from Obas, and Hadi and Tulim Sheikh. Do you see that?
Yes?
It starts at the bottom and it goes on. It says, Dear Jerome, the trailing email below was forwarded to me by acting CEO. Do you see that?
Mm-hmm.
We're concerned about the contents of the letter, especially the opening line that, based on the letter from South African Airways chair received yesterday by Airbus, it seems that the board hasn't approved the A320 swap and A330-300 yet. See that?
Yes?
Now the next page, 196F, says, the SAA board approved the A320 swap by A330. And there has been no change in that regard. Right? The slight change in the transaction that the letter refers to is in respect to how the A330s would be funded. The board has opted to engage an African aircraft leasing company which will provide the financing for the A330s. You see that?
Yes.
That's from the company secretary.
Yes.
Now, yesterday you said this was something made up by the chairperson.
Yes.
How does it then that the company secretary would write the very same thing?
Because she's repeating the same lie. She's basically, that's a complete lie. The board, the slight change in the she's basically copying the content of the letter that Ruth actually wrote the letter. She's the one who handled correspondence for the chair. So she copied and pasted what was in the letter to Airbus, and she copied it to Jerome from Airbus. Because Jerome is saying that he received the letter, so that's at the bottom of page 160F, 196F, and he's telling, I mean, we are very surprised, and the letter is saying that there will be a delay by a month or two. It doesn't work for us, and therefore, you are going to receive a request for the outstanding PDPs of $16.8 million and another PDP request for the soon-to-come November 2015 PDP of USD $22.4 million. So he is basically, upon receipt of the letter of the chair, is saying you are now going to receive from us an invoice of round about $39 million. And so that the acting CEO, Tuli Mshe, sends it to Ruth Kibuka because she doesn't know what this is about, because the acting CEO was not in copy of that letter sent by the chair to Airbus. So she's sending it to Ruth Kibuka, company secretary, who handles the correspondence to and from the chair. And the company secretary, I suppose on instruction from the chair, responds by rephrasing the content of the letter that had been sent to Airbus the day before, unbeknownst to the executive. And again, the company secretary here is committing a big mistake, because she is writing that the board has opted to engage an African leasing company which will provide the financing for the A330s. But the reality is there is absolutely no supporting evidence. There was no board resolution, there was no board meeting, and there was no discussion with the executive. So she is simply restating the same lie, but on an email. And then finally, on this occasion now, the executive is aware that something is not really going as per plan.
Valerie, can I take that adjournment you proposed?
Yes, everyone listen to only key break. So you've got 15 minutes after handing down this chart. That's the council are going to adjourn, and we're starting at 9:50.
Milady, may...
I'm trying to be practical. So you've got a choice now. Otherwise, you can argue it. I'll get the bundle of keys.
Milady,
Argue it. I'll allow Mr. Buthelezi to argue it. I'll stand down, consider the argument, and then I'll make the decision. But if you then not done by 4 o'clock, your witness will have to be here on Monday.
Milady, that's not what I'm standing up asking for. I am asking for Mr. Buthelezi to spell out his version so that this witness knows what he's responding to.
There is a case already indicated to Mr. Buthelezi that the version should be put on. Thus far, to a certain extent, he did it during the first witness, and I suppose he will do it. And if he doesn't, he does it on his own.
As the court pleases.
So I'll allow that in order to accommodate your witness and his schedule.
As the court pleases.
Thank you. Now, before we adjourned, you then said that the company secretary, what the company secretary wrote was incorrect. Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying that what the company secretary wrote in this email is the same content that was written in the letter sent by the chair, and it is indeed untrue.
And is there anybody else then who said this is untrue? Well, I'm just... Yeah.
Otherwise, you're going to hearsay evidence from somebody else voting this.
No. I'm just asking, do you know anybody else who raised similar sentiment?
Well, I don't know, because I'm sitting at home. By then, I'm already on special leave. So, but what I know is that this is not the truth. So, and it is not the truth for anyone who knows the truth. So, I guess anybody who is rational and honest would have the exact same opinion as me.
Can we go to page 196C? There's an email at the bottom from Ursula Figelepi, General Manager, Legal Risk and Compliance. Do you see that? Sorry, my lady, I'm still in the same bundle. I think it's volume 3. Yes, my lady. 196C. 196C, my lady. Now, this is correspondence, if I read it correctly, based on the timestamps. Sorry, it starts at 196D, I beg your pardon. Or, in fact, 196E. Well, the last email on E is from Jerome, writing to Ruth, who was the company secretary, right? Mm-hmm. And then we move back to 196D. And then there's an email from Ursula copying Ruth to an email from Ursula to Ruth copying Tulim Sheh, acting CEO. And it says, Dear Ruth, this is now on the 5th of October. 2 days after that email you said was wrong. She says, we will need more details on the aircraft leasing company. Do you see that? Mm-hmm. And then it says, we will need more details on the aircraft leasing company and the proposal financed transaction, as the current transaction does not anticipate the involvement of such company. Right? Okay. Then we move to the email about that. It's a response from Ruth to Ursula. It says, "Hi Ursula, we do not have any details yet on the African leasing company, on the aircraft leasing company, I beg your pardon, as the board is still looking at various options." Do you see that?
Yes.
So, this is what the company secretary says. She
Yes.
says the board is still looking at various options.
Yes.
Now, the email I wanted to start with is at 196C. It is from Ursula to Ruth, copying the acting CEO. It says, "Hi Ruth, I refer to our discussion and our telephonic conversation with Norton Rose this afternoon. I'm not too sure if you know who Norton Rose is.
Yes, I know who they are.
Okay. As discussed, you will request finance to prepare a submission to the board on the details of the involvement of the new aircraft leasing company in the swap transaction." Do you see that?
Yes.
Now, this is correspondence between somebody from legal risk compliance and the company secretary, talking between themselves, copying the acting CEO. The chair is not involved. And they're still speaking about this new aircraft leasing company, more specifically to be involved in the swapping transaction. Do you see that? So, we will argue that there's no truth in what you say. And it will be our version that this local leasing company or African leasing company was something being discussed at a board level. Do you accept that?
No, I actually refute this, my lady. It's not true, and you have the proof here in front of you.
Yes.
Because you can see that. So, if I may give you a bit of context, it's the first time I'm reading this correspondence because I wasn't part of this. And so I'm reading it, and it looks like a joke. Excuse me, my lady, but this is an embarrassment. This is shameful because we are in October. We are 10 months after the beginning of our engagements with Airbus. We have been doing hours, weeks of negotiations involving lawyers from law firms in France, in South Africa, everywhere. We've structured thousands of pages of documentation. We've obtained approval from Minister Nene. And suddenly, again, out of the blue, you have a company secretary who starts organizing a change in a $500 million transaction that she has no idea about. She hasn't got any qualification about aircraft financing or aircraft acquisition, and she starts giving orders. Now, if you read her emails, she says, "Hi Ursula, we do not have any details yet on the aircraft leasing company as the board is still looking at various options." But that is a lie. It is a blatant lie, because if you turn to page 196C, Wolf Meyer, who, my lady, is a board member and is a very important person in that transaction because he's the CFO. So that is something that would be of concern to him. He says, "I refuse to do a submission that is forced onto me without properly understanding the vehicle. It would be irresponsible of me. Besides, the chair refuses to speak to me about this. So how could the board have made a decision or any discussion on that matter when one of the 4 board members is not engaged in there, and it just happens to be the only board member that has a bit of knowledge about finance?" So this is the actual proof of the complete travesty of this transaction, and the fact that the chair has now thrown this into the hands of poor Ruth Kibuka, who's trying to act on her orders and is trying to ex post produce a submission and asking finance to prepare a submission to the board on the details of the involvement of the new aircraft leasing company when the executive was never consulted. So we are in a complete reversal of responsibilities. The proper way of handling this is the executive makes proposals to the board considers submissions and authorizes transactions, and then depending on the type of transaction it goes up to ministerial level. Here we have something that is forced onto the executive, and we need to now justify ex post by producing a submission that will go to the board, but it just so happens that we are asking the CFO to produce a submission to justify something that he's not aware of, although he's a board member. So it's a complete travesty. So this, I'm grateful that you showed me that exchange, because I think it is the irrefutable proof of the complete mess that's been created by the chairperson when she sent that irregular letter, which is to me forgery. And I believe had this been done in other jurisdictions, she would have been suspended the same day that she sent this letter, because it's a disgrace.
Let's go back to what Wolfmeyer says, which is what you referenced. He says, I refuse to do a submission that is forced onto me without properly understanding the vehicle. Do you understand what he means by the vehicle?
Well, it's probably the financial vehicle.
I beg your pardon?
It's probably the financial vehicle.
You see, what this correspondence is about is that nobody has details on what this African leasing company looks like. Do you accept that?
That's exactly the point.
But the point is, there exists a decision that says such company is going to exist.
That is not true. The decision can only emanate from a board resolution to that effect, and I haven't been shown any board resolution that says a aircraft leasing company has been established, funded by whom, to do what. The only existence of this aircraft leasing company at this point is in the mind of the chair.
And then you'd say the same about what the company secretary says as well.
Well, the company secretary here is saying something that's not true, which is a problem, and that demonstrates the extent of the disaster when you have now a massive transaction that is completely derailed, and the consequences are the bankruptcy of the business. Because if you continue to look at the trail, so the same document, I remind you that it starts with Airbus responding to the letter that they received saying what you, Mrs. Chair, are referring to is completely different from what has been in negotiation for the past 9 months. And therefore, we are going to send you invoices for approximately $50 million. SAA does not have this $50 million, and when you receive an invoice for an amount that is so high that you can't meet it legally, you have to declare yourself insolvent. So that chain that the chair has provoked with this letter is basically the insolvency of SAA. It's the loss of 12,000 jobs. It's the loss of 40% of the traffic in South Africa. Empty hotels, businesses that can't go to their factories, mining companies have to close down.
So, look, I think I've covered almost everything, except the one point to say, look, I'll go back to a couple of things. Sorry, my lady, I'm struggling with my throat. I'll go back to two things in particular. First one being, I've shown you proof, which you reject, but it will be our version that this concept of an African leasing company wasn't the figment of the imagination of the chair, but was something discussed at board level and agreed to at board level, as is corroborated by the minutes and correspondence from the company secretary and subsequent discussions. It's these ones that I'm referring to specifically, my lady. Yes, that I've shown him. Yes, yes. Yes, ma'am. Yes. Then the second point is, with regards to the evidence you gave yesterday, two issues. One, we will again persist that there is no truth in the allegation that it was President Zuma who instructed the chairperson or the former chairperson to instruct Mr. Poseidon not to sign the lease agreement, the MOU, sorry. And it will be our version as well that even after the Paris incidents, the process unfolded to the extent that the board ultimately followed through with various stakeholder engagements, and that there's no truth in the allegation that the chair blocked this transaction in Paris, and therefore Emirates walked away from the deal, and the deal was lost by virtue of those actions. Do you accept that proposition?
No, I don't accept it. I'm sorry, my lady. I mean, that's not. I think I've demonstrated over the past 2 days that that is not the way things happened. And coming back to your idea that there was a concept doesn't lease aircrafts. A concept doesn't acquire $500 million worth of aircraft in less than 2 months. So even if we accepted the fact that there was a concept that could have been pursued, a concept cannot acquire aircraft from Airbus in less than 2 months, because it is materially impossible to transform a concept into a working financial vehicle that will be eligible for this transaction. So the fact that the chairperson, even if she had a mandate to do that, that she would jump the gun right to a supplier, which is not supposed to do, and tell the supplier, we have a concept which will now lease the aircraft. It doesn't work because and we need to push it by 1 or 2 months. It doesn't work because if you know what aircraft acquisition is, and if you know what the industrial planning involved is, you know that you have to make changes at least 1 year in advance. And to say, now we are going to make, in 2 months, build a company that's going to be capable of buying this aircraft is, excuse me, but it's a demonstration of complete ignorance, which is a problem when you have been the chairperson of SAA for so many years.
Thank you. No further questions. My lady, I'm severely constrained with my throat as well. I'm struggling to speak. But that's... No, I'm not stopping the process. I've ended, my lady. That's it. Yes.
My lady, I have no questions in re-examination. My lady, I'm afraid our next witness is coming on Monday. We didn't anticipate this. And then I thought I might re-examine after lunch.
Well, we will start Monday 9:30. Will that suit anyone? If you
9:30 is good for us.